We often hear nets on the amateur radio service, but how do they actually get organized in the first place? We're going to talk about radio net organization, the role of a net manager, and how you can be a good net manager. Stick around.
Black one, black one.
Radio nets are on-air meetings. Like in-person meetings, they can happen for many reasons. This video focuses on nets in the amateur radio service organized to provide a non-commercial system of communication, whether for the public directly or for an agency that serves the public. Effective radio nets are not just on-air operations. They are coordinated efforts. Goals need to be defined. Operators need to be recruited. Standards need to be set. Operators need to be trained. Schedules need to be established. Operations need to be evaluated. And reports need to be written. There are other emergency and disaster response services that use amateur radio as well, including the Hurricane Watch Net, Skywarn, and community emergency response teams. In these cases, these organizations have operations and their members are using radio for communication. While today's advice might be relevant to those operations, we are focused today on nets designed to communicate on behalf of others. In the amateur radio service, there are two big ARRL programs that use nets routinely: the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, ARRL, and National Traffic System, NTS. We are going to use the Central Ohio Traffic Net, COTN, as the exemplar. Everything discussed in here is current as of November 2021. Our goal today is to prepare you to be a net manager, and a good one. To do so, you'll need 5 things. You must understand the organization behind the net. You need to understand the relationship between the net and its users. You need knowledge of scope and authority of the net manager office. You need knowledge of how to make appointments, and then how to schedule events and lead volunteers. For some reference, my background is that I am a member of the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL, under which auspices I have the designation of Official Relay Station, Official Emergency Station. I am a past Ohio Section Assistant Section Emergency Coordinator, and I have other appointments as well. I hold a U.S. Department of Homeland Security Auxiliary Communications, OXCOM qualification. I'm an operator in the Department of Homeland Security Shares HF Radio Service, and I have been the Black Swan Exercise Director since 2017. I am the Central Ohio Traffic Net Manager for the 7th term. This is the video that I wish that I had when I was considering accepting a nomination as Net Manager for COTN, and that I wish that I had that I could refer to as I was just getting started in the role of Net Manager. The organization behind the net. The Central Ohio Traffic Net is what is legally known as an unincorporated association. We're not a subdivision of any other group, and we have not organized as a corporation, partnership, or other legal entity. We're just individuals with a common interest, and we work together. Our association is governed by articles of association available on our website and by bylaws that are also available on the website. The articles of association define the purpose of the organization and its critical functions. The bylaws establish the guidelines for how we get our work done. We also have standard operating procedures, SOP, that define in more detail how exactly to accomplish particular tasks, like to organize volunteers, activate volunteers, report on activity. The SOP also defines things like frequencies and how to use them. That said, we do not operate in a vacuum. As the net control operator says every evening, we are a part of the Ohio section of the National Traffic System. Our operation is organized to be a part of a national system of message origination, relay, and delivery, which is the National Traffic System. The National Traffic System is itself connected to other systems, giving amateur radio an international, non-commercial messaging capability. The American Radio Relay League, ARRL Methods, Practices, and Guidelines, MPG, documents common practice in amateur radio for message origination, relay, and delivery. It gives us specific guidance, and other ARRL publications like the ARRI's Field Resources Manual help us to see what might be headed our way. These sources will be the most commonly accepted standards for training on most common procedure. As COTN is a training net, that's an issue we always need to keep in mind. We're helping operators to learn to be an effective part of a viable and resilient messaging system. Understand the relationship between the net and its users. In earlier videos, we discussed the tasks of messaging stations: origination, relay to send, relay to receive, and delivery. The stations can be located in various places that need messaging capability. For example, consider a widespread internet service disruption. It happens from time to time, as we have seen in the past few years. It's not the internet is down, but it can render service unreliable for large groups of subscribers in an area for a period of time. That can be hours or days, sometimes even weeks if it's accompanied with power loss as well. At that time, a county emergency management agency could have its auxiliary communications (OXCOM) team active. That OXCOM team might be using various radio services that can work without internet-supported repeaters like VHF simplex locally to coordinate among various police, fire, and EMS services. The first nets that will be established will be the most basic function. Can the stations communicate directly? Will other stations be needed to receive from one and send to the other in relay fashion? Can they send and receive digital messages? Can they provide relay services for other stations? Can they provide gateway services to other radio services or systems? This is the use case that we typically see operators in the Amateur Radio Emergency Service ARRI's program training for. If we take that scenario and then add to it an ongoing incident that requires support, growth of the incident will introduce new requirements. Imagine that in the wake of an outbreak of tornadoes, local resources are overwhelmed. If local officials need more support than they can give each other, they may request support from the state. Doing so might require preliminary damage assessment reports. At this point, we are now moving more than just a verbal gist of a message. We're dealing with records that need to be relayed from one official to another, word for word, letter for letter. At this point, additional circuits will likely need to be established to provide relay service for such messages. Operators on those circuits will need to understand things like how to handle various precedents, ensuring correct origination to capture what the originator, that is, the author of the message, intended, and to provide the right quality of service. Such stations also need operators to receive such messages and to deliver them. That is to say, to turn them into a form that can be used by the intended recipient and can get it handed off to the official correctly. If stations need support from other stations, like relays and gateways, those also need to be available and ready. These message relay circuits and the operators representing the agencies to them are, in the case that traffic handlers train for, what we see in NTS. In short, this is a job that the Central Ohio Traffic Net intended to train operators to perform. Stations that need to use the relay circuits may be at an emergency operations center, as in the example that we just gave. They could be performing relay service from home stations. They could be at an incident command post at the scene of a disaster. It isn't the job of the net manager to make those calls. It's the job of the net manager to ensure that people understand the potential use cases, the tasks that need to be performed, how to do those tasks, and that the operators have had the practice needed to show that they can perform. What are the duties and the scope of authority for the net manager? Founding documents will answer that question for any net. A net manager might be appointed by an agency, as in the case of an OXCOM team. A net manager might be appointed by a volunteer non-government organization, as in the case of an amateur radio emergency service, ARRI's group. Many traffic nets are independent, non-government organizations that voluntarily affiliate with the National Traffic System, Radio Relay International, and others as a practical matter to make sure that there is a system unified that works together. The Central Ohio Traffic Net is an example of such an organization. Let's see how that works here. Before the Articles of Association are created, there is no COTN. There are only 7 Articles of Association, and they set forth the foundations for the Central Ohio Traffic Net, establishing the name of the organization, the purpose of the organization, the principal office of the organization, the office of the net manager, scheduling of meetings for the organization, how to deem vacancy of the net manager office, and then the membership of the COTN, who actually are the members. The bylaws provide additional detail on the structure of COTN. For example, Article 4 says that the affairs of the net will be under the control of the net manager, and that the net manager is to be elected annually. It does not go into detail and say how. Bylaws give more detail about how to implement Article 4 from the Article of Association. Let's see how. Bylaw 2 defines the voting membership of COTN. Bylaw 3 defines the conduct of the election, including an official called a teller will be appointed by the net manager on the 26th of November. The teller will call for nominations for net manager on the 1st through the 7th of December. The teller will call for votes on the 8th to the 15th of December. It describes how members vote, how ties are broken, and that the teller announces the results on the 16th of December. Bylaw 4 requires that the newly elected net manager then appoint an assistant net manager, 3 advisory board members, and other staff members as deemed necessary to assist the net manager in the administration of the net. Bylaw 4 also spells out that the new net manager will assume the office with the administration on the 1st of January. Other bylaws covering appointment of net control operators, arrangement of liaisons, completion and transmission of reports, and presiding over meetings round out the definition of the net manager's job. Still other bylaws set forth basic requirements of how nets are to be called, run, and reported. Finally, the means by which bylaws are amended also get specified. Where the bylaws establish some specific requirements to implement Articles of Association, there are still some specifics undefined. Article of Association 4 says that the organization will work under the control of the net manager. Bylaw 4 defines some required appointments, as well as opening the door for other appointments. Getting the day-to-day work of the net done requires some very specific details. For example, Article 8 says that each net must start with 4 specific sentences, but it goes no further. It doesn't ask for liaison stations and so on. We need to know which frequency to be on, where to go if that frequency is unavailable, and what types of signals to use, what time to meet. All of those are defined in our standard operating procedures, the SOP. The SOP is the nitty-gritty of how work gets done. Some nets might lack founding documents and have only an SOP or an equivalent. COTN's SOP gives more detail on the offices required under the bylaws and sets forth offices allowed by the same bylaw to support net operations. It defines not just the net manager, but also the assistant net manager, advisory board members, personnel officer, training officer, finance officer, liaison officer, that is the representative to other organizations. There's an operations officer and supporting roles there. Net control operators, alternate net control operators, liaison stations, which is to say representatives to other nets, and then also a statistician responsible for receiving and compiling the reports of our operation and turning those, moving those forward. The SOP defines net reports, net acknowledgments, after-action reports, and the structure of the annual meeting. We have procedures and examples for regular operating schedule, high-speed operation, simplex operation, activation for special operations, signal operation, and the teller's conduct of elections. The SOP can be modified at the whim of the net manager. It is written and maintained by the net manager under the authority specified by Article 4 and Bylaw 4. The only thing that it may not do is contravene a bylaw, because the bylaw is foundational policy. Changes there must be approved by the voting membership. It may also not violate any of the Articles of Association because that is foundational even for the bylaws. Managing volunteers. Our founding and guiding documentation established which offices to fill and how to conduct them. Success as a net manager will require more than that, though. Here I offer a bit of practical advice. First, recognize that everyone's time is valuable. Whether you're working with a 16-year-old high school student, a single early career adult, a middle-aged shift supervisor with 4 kids in 3 schools and a spouse at home, or a retiree, you have an asset, someone who wants to do some good with whatever time they can devote to the net. Volunteers will come from all walks of life and every background imaginable. Don't make a big deal about the doctor or professor or executive, or downplay the gardener, the mechanic, or the secretary. Every volunteer is bringing something to the table. What is it? Do you know? How can they be helped to put it to good use, to develop it further, to help others? Every volunteer is looking for something for their investment. What is it? Do you know? Do they know? Can they be helped to find it? How can they help others to find what they're looking for? All of these are things that you can do as net manager if you get to talk with the members of the net. Amateur radio is a powerful service and can be used to good effect to help others. In message relay operations, we often do not serve members of the public or even relief organizations or agencies directly. We serve other radio operators who are serving those organizations and people. Beyond that work on air, we are associated, as spelled out in our Articles of Association. We serve each other. Volunteers of COTN, for whatever reason, want to keep messages flowing when the common means of doing so won't work, whether because of overload, damage to infrastructure, expense, or because they want to delight the recipient with novelty. To ensure that those volunteers can be a part of a viable service to address those needs, the net manager needs to create a schedule and promote events in it. When I look at a calendar year for COTN, I see daily operations as a baseline. It needs to be addressed, but that's not enough. I look for opportunities to engage our volunteers and our message relay service with other events and exercises. In the past several years, we have used a schedule that is straightforward to run, but that allows for content to vary enough to keep things interesting. Of course, we have daily operations. We can deliver messages going to recipients in Central Ohio. We can originate messages coming from Central Ohio. And we have liaisons to other messaging nets and systems that operate every day that keep Central Ohio connected to the rest of the world by amateur radio. We can encourage operators to make use of daily operations, originating messages for other people, especially non-radio operators who might want to send a message to someone else, whether as part of some agency or NGO function, for some personal reason, or just as a novelty. We can encourage operators to make use of daily operations by delivering messages for other people as well. Don't let them just call somebody up and start reading off a radiogram as if it's a radio relay. Make sure that they understand how to get the message delivered properly so that they can get through and that the intended recipient can get the message and understand it. The annual meeting is required for the business of the organization of Central Ohio Traffic Net. There isn't a requirement that it happens in January, but as that's the time when the office of the net manager begins, it probably shouldn't be too late in the year. A few years ago, we started meeting every month on the second Thursday so we could train and plan off air. This has been really helpful, both helping us to ensure that we're showing people how to do things and to give them a chance to show up and just try things. Doing so in that environment helps them to do it without being on a repeater system that covers everybody who's listening in a 10-county area. It's a lot less pressure to try being net control in a group of 6 or 8 or 12 or 15 people sitting around a conference table or using low-power handheld radios spread around a field than it is to be on the high-profile repeater system. It's easier to give a presentation and talk about something that you know or something you've learned. It's a lot easier to ask questions of somebody giving a presentation in that context. Each January, the ARRL Ohio Section ARRIS program has a VHF Plus contest. The purpose there is to make contact with other stations using frequencies higher than 30 megahertz. What role does a traffic net play in that? Well, if you look closely at the four corners of the rules for the contest, there isn't, but that isn't necessarily the end of it. If you think creatively about what is happening, you'll realize that it's a very good exercise for operators to test the reach of their stations, their ability to understand others when the signal is weak, and their ability to coordinate with others. If you see in the rules that spotting nets are allowed, nets where operators can meet to exchange information about where other stations can be found, you might decide to run a net so that others can report into the net and get such information. You might define a schedule for 1-hour shifts for net control operators. You might have that schedule a station responsible for keeping track of the spot reports and add them to a bulletin. The contesters won't come in and send a radiogram, but they'll tell you which frequency another station is on and what their call sign is, and maybe other information like how many points they're worth. Each April, the Ohio Section ARRIS sponsors its NVIS Day event. It's not a contest, it's an operating event that encourages stations to work with different antenna systems to test near vertical incident skywave (NVIS) propagation for reliable short and medium distance HF communication. This is a good opportunity to show HF operation. Maybe a traffic handler on COTN net roster would like to lead an effort to show NVIS propagation, how to use it, and then to demonstrate some operation on the Ohio section's HF traffic nets, like the Ohio single sideband net for voice or Buckeye net, using Morse code on CW. Maybe you can reach out to other VHF traffic nets around the section and try to establish a direct link between the two traffic nets to exchange radiograms as if in a disaster that requires ongoing message exchange between those 2 points and therefore not necessarily optimally going through a section net. Each June is the ARRL Field Day. Points are awarded for participation, but it's designed to be an emergency operation event. Stations get points for sending radiograms to ARRL section officials and for radiograms going to others. This is a perfect time to activate special operations with their own schedules of operation at various points throughout the 24-hour period and to take advantage of being able to receive those radiograms and to get them delivered. It's a good opportunity for individual operators to work with ARRIS, Oxcom, Club, and other multi-operator stations to help them to originate their radiograms and to show people there how to use COTN to handle those messages. In the fall, traditionally the first full weekend of October, we have the ARRL Simulated Emergency Test, the SET. Just like Field Day, it's a great opportunity to work with others to offer special operations that keep message relay circuits working throughout a 48-hour period. Work with ARRIS emergency coordinators to see what they are doing and what COTN might do to help. Work with agencies, Oxcom teams, to see what their stations are doing and COTN might be able to support. If there isn't a viable scenario to tap into to exercise the circuits, or the scenario requires local planning, consider how members of the public might be affected by a communications outage and how COTN operators might help to keep people connected in that case. Take volunteers and have them operate in public places where people might like to play along or to simulate scenes where a message center might be welcome. As I conclude my 7th term of service, I want to thank everyone who has been a part of the Central Ohio Traffic Net. It had been in operation for about 28 years before I even got my amateur license. I have found that the work of net manager is fulfilling, it's rewarding, and I'm very happy to be a part of a net with so many volunteers who are looking to help the net and to try to be a good place to learn radio messaging, a place to try new things, and to be part of a service that can be used when the common daily options for communication just won't do the job. I hope that the net is in better shape than when I found it, and I hope that the next net manager will be able to leave it in better shape still. It is a big job, but it is also a team effort. You don't need to carry the weight of the net all on your shoulders as net manager. It doesn't need to take a huge amount of time, a huge amount of effort. A few hours of planning, some ongoing encouragement, and some direction, and then getting out of the way of the volunteers that you've unleashed is really what you need to be successful in that role. 7-3. This is Radio KD8TTE, out.